Hello everybody. I was looking at everybody's bios earlier and I just could not believe what an amazing group of women we have in the room. So thank you for coming along. I am so excited about hearing more about you and your money journeys. Elaine, could we start with you? Could you tell us just a little bit about your background and perhaps some key moments in your life?
Well, I was trundling along as an NHS consultant and academic in medicine. My husband was an entrepreneur, had set up his own company, and really we were very comfortable. Life was going on. He was building the company, it became international, and then he sold his company. And suddenly we went from being comfortable professional people to having a huge amount more money than I'd ever had before, quite suddenly, overnight. And that, I suppose, was a massive turning point for us both. And that led to us seeking out some professional advice about how we should manage our money, somebody who could do the tax and do the thinking about the future, which was quite different. We both of us came from very ordinary families. Nobody we knew had any money. We didn't have any friends except people who were in our own professional groups. So we needed some help. And then we didn't survive all this. Our marriage broke up. And as soon as that happened, I mean, we found Paradigm Norton, which was a miracle for us. But when my marriage broke up 3 or 4 years later, I realized that I really did need some help myself, because we split everything 50-50, which was marvelous. We never argued about it. And very fortunately, I was able to continue on and get some help with thinking about the future. And then, of course, I went on and married somebody else, and he was not from a background with money at all. And he was an impoverished scientific academic. So we really did need some help. And we have continued, of course, to require that help. And I couldn't manage without it.
Wonderful, thank you. Fee, same question to you.
Okay, well, my career started after a degree in business at Bath University, and I went on to work for Anderson Consulting, which is now Accenture. I realised that IT wasn't the career for me, so I ended up working for an organisation called Perot Systems, still in the IT industry, and was heading up their graduate recruitment programme. Whilst I did that, I got involved with occupational psychology and testing and personality questionnaires, and I had then met the person who I then married, and I decided to set up my own business doing the same sorts of things, which was still doing work with performance management and coaching and mentoring, leadership programs. And I met Nick, and we set up, I set up this small consultancy together. When I had my children, however, we decided that I was going to be at home and he was going to go to London and have his career. So my clients I was working with were also in London, so to do that as well would have been a full-time nanny, and we just decided that wasn't what we were going to do. So I had a career break of about 8 years while he was in London, and when he left his full-time job there, that's when we consulted with a financial planner, and that was the best thing we could have done. Great for us to be able to share what we wanted to do in the future together, and how we were going to make the use of I guess, the money that he'd made when he exited the business.
Wonderful, thank you. Tina?
I think running my business, obviously making a profit was hugely important, and a lot of energy and thought went into how to do that, to generate the work, and am I doing it at the right price? And as the business grew, of course, my savings grew, my savings individually and for the business grew, but that was as far as my focus went. And it wasn't until I went to Spain on a 1-week holiday with a couple of friends, both of them women, who were also very successful. And we were just standing at a bar, and I think I said something stupid like, what kind of interest rate do you get on your deposits? I said, deposits? We don't keep our money in banks. Have you heard of Northern Rock? And it hadn't occurred to me to think differently at all. You know, every time there was any money for the business or for me, I stuck it in a bank. And at that point, you know, I think they called me bonkers, and they asked, you know, why did I think that I could make these kinds of decisions, and do I want to get on and have an easier life? And then completely by chance, you know, feeling slightly foolish, but also thinking there was another way, I met the financial officer of a TV company who had met Ruth at what was then the Red House. And he said to me, why don't you go and let someone else make these decisions for you? And I mean, I think the rest is history. I met them, I liked them, and I joined them joined you when you were Red House, and then Paradigm, which was great because it helped me manage all the things that I needed to manage as an individual, for my family and my home and my business. But it's really come into its own in the last 2 years when I've retired. And now I can do things like travel. And I have moved from London to Manchester. I've done up a house. I bought the car of my dreams that I can barely get in and out of, but I've done it. And I don't have to think about it. And I think those were the big changes. The eye-opener for my friends, and then wanting to live differently. So that's right.
Wonderful. Wonderful. It's a real testament, isn't it, to the power of financial planning, wanting to live differently. I think so many people don't know that that's the superpower of financial planning. And lastly, Agatha.
Well, interesting stories from everyone. Well, I started my career working in a city law firm. My decision to study law came as a bit of a surprise to my family, who I think were expecting something more creative and certainly are sort of more creative themselves. But I decided to study law and then started working, did a training contract in the city, and quite quickly realised it wasn't the environment that I was most naturally thriving in, and I was spending all my free time going to gigs and hanging out with kind of musicians and other more creative folks. And I guess one of the key turning points for me was then I was sent on secondment to MTV and was in that environment where suddenly I was working TV and music and absolutely loved it, and realised there was another path where you could be a professional but potentially work in businesses that I was slightly more interested in. So I moved over and spent a long time working in TV, in-house as a lawyer. And then about 5 years ago, a guy that I was working closely with there sort of said to me, well, have you considered maybe moving into a more commercial position? I think you'd be quite good at that. And so I spent about 3 seconds thinking about it and abandoned my career in law and moved over to doing more commercial business development things. In terms of how I came to Paradigm Norton, I would say, well, a bit of a cheat in that my aunt was a financial advisor. So she would give me pointers early in my career, and as I was sort of making more money and receiving equity from the company I was working in, she would sort of give me a little bit of guidance. And then when she came to retire, she said, well, you should do what I do, which is work with Sally. So that's how I started working with her. And it's funny because initially I sort of thought, well, you know, this isn't really, you know, for me, why would I do this? I'm not wildly wealthy. I haven't done all these incredible things. And I think after once, and actually I think with Sally, what she taught me very early on was actually that I could spend more than I realised, and help me sort of look at what I had. I think I was concerned that perhaps financial planning meant taking your money away for another day, and not actually getting to enjoy it, whereas actually very much the advice was almost the contrary. So that's kind of been my journey.
That's so interesting, isn't it? That almost that permission to spend.
Yeah.
So what did you buy?
I would say I maybe upgraded my wardrobe was one of the first. I'd always gone, you know, I had a mother who was always very budget conscious, and I would always go for, you know, the best value at the best price. And so I think, yes, that was the first realization that perhaps I could have a slightly more upgraded wardrobe.
So I'm gonna stay with you actually, Agatha, because you've said something really interesting there. So your background was quite creative. I think you said your dad was a musician earlier. What's your earliest money story, or your earliest memory of money?
Well, yes. So I was actually born on a chicken farm. My father actually did set up a recording studio for himself within that, so he's always had the musical side of things. But yes, and unfortunately, fairly early on in my life, it was around the time of the salmonella scandal. I don't know if you remember when comments were made by a Tory MP that, you know, effectively put a lot of chicken farms, egg farms out of business. So whilst I don't remember, obviously I was too young to really be aware of what was happening. What I was aware was that we'd left the farm and that lifestyle living with the family and all the people working on the farm and we're sort of in rental accommodation and so my earliest memory of money is effectively, you know, the farm going bust and us having to leave and that being quite traumatic for me as a child because obviously I didn't understand any of that. So, and we ended up moving around quite a lot after that. So I think, yes, not a particularly positive first memory of money, shall we say, but yeah, that would be the sort of earliest awareness of it.
And so having a conversation with your financial planner about you being able to spend money, that must have been quite a change for you.
Yes, definitely. And I think that I'd probably always carried this fear of potentially losing my home because that sort of was that early childhood memory. So I'd always been very careful around not spending too much in case that would happen to me. Although I would clarify, I live in a 2-bed flat in Mile End and not a chicken farm. But yeah, so I think it was in fact really liberating to actually look at it with more objectivity around the numbers and the reality of what my life looked like and what the freedom I had actually bought for myself by working all the hours that I had over the years.
So Tina, you were born in India and moved over here when you were a tiny baby, which gave you a sort of a cultural mix, I suppose, in your childhood. Do you have a first memory of money?
My father was a banker. That's why we came to the UK to open up the Bank of India here in London and then in Manchester as well. So money was always a conversation at home. But I think within my culture as well, money is significant. You know, there is a day in the year at Diwali when you actually decorate your account book for the year. And the whole concept of abundance and it being God-given and all of those things really sat within our thinking. But my earliest, it's really interesting because I wanted to hark back irresistibly to something that Agatha said earlier, which was that I think all the way through, you know, not only in the home, but in the relationships and the friendships I've had as I've been growing up, the idea of money as being something that you save, there's some scarcity around it. How do you manage it? Almost as though it's a monster that's going to escape if you don't take care of it. There's some fear, and I do remember having this, some fear about not having enough, and therefore having to squirrel it away. And I'm a brilliant squirrel, and I would squirrel it away. And it really wasn't until I sort of got my financial advisor who sat there and did exactly what you're talking about, which is said, look at what you've got, look at how it works. We'll take these things off you. And why are you sitting on it? Why are you fretting about it? The mindset shift for me was between how do I manage not having money and keeping myself from not having money, to how do I enjoy my life and money will be there in the background. So taking it from central focus to peripheral, and therefore it becomes my utility as opposed to my purpose.
And how did that mindset shift feel for you?
Liberating. Who said liberating? You said liberating earlier. It was liberating, really. I just stopped worrying. And in a way, I also said to Tommy and Ruth, who I was working with at the time, I said, I don't want to worry. You tell me what I need to do so that that doesn't happen. Because I'd felt now what the freedom of not worrying about it. And I don't worry now. I don't worry now. And I'm sure that people around me get worried when they see, you know, my car. I don't worry. I just fill the damn thing up and go. My dog eats the best food.
I love that. Elaine, do you want to talk to us a little bit about your relationship with money? We've talked about scarcity versus abundance. Do you think money is there for saving or is it for spending?
Well, it used to be for saving, but there's no doubt as you go through life and get older, you do realise that actually it is there for spending, because unless you have this massive feeling that you must leave it to somebody or something, then you better get on and enjoy it. So I've gradually turned from being a saver to a spender. Having said that, I still want there to be the security of knowing that it's always there. So, and old habits do die hard. If you don't really get a lot of money until you're in your late 40s, early 50s, which I didn't, then the habits of going to Marks and Spencer's for your underwear, very hard to give up. You know, I mean, the day after I got all this money, I thought, well, we needed something for the grand signing, you know, of this thing. And I thought, well, I will go down Bond Street and go into one of those shops that I daren't go into before now and get something really special, you know. And I did. Givenchy used to have a little shop in South Molton Street. And I saw this jacket and it was about 10,000 quid or something. Well, not quite that, I don't think, in those days, but something that was outrageous. And I thought, well, I will make myself buy something that I've never, ever could have done before. And I did, indeed, and I had that jacket for years and years and years. But you suddenly realise you have got to change your attitude. You cannot carry on thinking that you're impoverished and that you've got to save for the future. So you do have to change your attitude, but old habits die very hard.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
How did you achieve that mindset change? Because some people never do, I think. Some people are very afraid of money.
Yes, well, I think just gradually over the years I convinced myself that you do have to, and also to take more risks. I was so used to not taking any risks and then suddenly realised I could take some risks and I could enjoy it. So, you know, you could see if your risk-taking paid off a bit. And when it does once or twice, then you think, right, that's fine. And I can be guided about what risks I can take. Now, as I'm getting older, I realise that perhaps your risk-taking appetite goes off a bit, naturally. And I want to make sure that I always have enough there for whatever happens in the future. But I think it happens gradually, but you do have to make a decision. I have to say, making the decision to go into that shop in Bond Street was probably the bravest thing I've ever done. And I was used to talking on public platforms by then. I was used to doing things. But it also gave me the freedom to say, no, you can give up doing what you've always done. And I had been asked before whether I would go into the House of Lords. And to be honest, I didn't think that I could, because I thought, no, I'd be letting the side down. You know, I need to keep the money rolling in. I need to keep the family doing what it does together. I won't do that. And then suddenly I realised, actually, I got another invitation. I said, yes, now I can do that.
How wonderful.
So that's something, you know, really my life did change. And I was able to do a lot of the things that I hadn't really risked doing before. So that was great.
Gosh, you see, you hadn't risked doing things before. I've looked at your bio, Elaine, and the first female professor at Guy's.
Yes, but that was all very conventional stuff, you know. I mean, okay, somebody has to be the first professor, female professor at Guy's. It was great fun. I was treated like, you know, like a China doll. Everybody was so wonderful and welcoming. So it was great.
But for you to talk about being brave and walking into a shop to buy something expensive for yourself after you've done all the things that you've done.
I know, it may sound bizarre, but I still get a sort of slight frisson of anxiety when I go down Bond Street into those shops. Does anybody else? I mean, is it just me that feels great?
Fiona, I think some of your experiences, I think, probably mirror a little bit of Elaine's in terms of your journey, your money journey through life a bit. Can you, are you a spender or are you a saver?
Mine has changed significantly since when I worked for myself and when I earned my own money, I was very motivated by earning the money, and I think that gave me self-esteem that maybe I perhaps needed to get from somewhere, and that's where it came from. So when it was mine, I was very comfortable to spend it and enjoyed spending it, and I think that kind of somehow did boost my self-esteem. But having then had a period of time where I wasn't working, I perhaps felt less inclined to spend the money because it wasn't mine that I'd earned. And since I've been doing what I do now for the last 10 years, I've had the privilege to set up a charity, and I feel so grateful to do that. And I actually don't really like spending an awful lot of money, actually. I don't heart for diamonds or yachts and fancy holidays and hotels. I get so much purpose and satisfaction from helping other people. So I've also sort of grown up with mental health issues. My father had bipolar disorder, so being happy and mentally happy myself, and having worked a lot in the last 10 years on my own mindset, yeah, having purpose and self-motivation to do something that deeply satisfies me and allows me to put my head on the pillow every night thinking I've done the best I can possibly do is far more satisfying to me than spending lots of money. So, and again, maybe I'm in a very privileged position where it's easy for me to say that because of the financial situation we're in, but I would rather have a day hiking and a pub lunch than a posh hotel.
Oh, give me a posh hotel. I do want a private jet, but I won't be travelling Ryanair very often.
So for your, so you went from being from self-employed and earning your own money to staying at home with the children. How did that change your relationships? That sort of, did you feel able? You spoke earlier about, I was very happy to spend the money when I earned it, but when I wasn't earning it, that changed.
Interesting.
It's a huge identity shift. You kind of go from this career person who's like really loving their job and motivated to earn money and do a good job for clients to literally being at home with 2 toddlers. And when you go for dinner parties, you have to justify that you used to have a career, and you sort of do a little CV synopsis when you meet somebody for the first time rather than just say that you're a stay-at-home mum. So yes, it's a big shift in identity, and so I think that was kind of the hardest thing at the time. You know, we bought a lovely family home that needed renovating, so I had a big project to do, and it worked great, and you know that was very happy, and we have no regrets. But it was a big shift in identity, which I guess other people get when they retire and they have to stop working, or don't have to stop working, they choose to stop working. But it is a big shift in identity.
Did it change your relationship with money?
I think, as I say, it just made me a little bit more aware of that it, even though obviously it was our money, it didn't feel quite so much like it was mine. So I felt more uncomfortable perhaps to go spending.
Tina, my mum always said to me, when debt comes knocking at the door, love jumps out the window. So similar question to you. How has money affected your life and your relationships?
I think fundamentally. I'm just trying to think about a turning point around that, but it's a bit difficult to say. I think up until a certain point, so when my children, all 3 of them were at school, I'd moved to Sheffield, I'd retrained as a counsellor, I had begun to work, but for very little money, doing lots of interesting, risky things, but for very little money. But I was working hard, and actually I think that was part of what made my relationship, my marriage come to an end. What was striking, and I thought about this when I got the questions from you before coming here, was that at the point that we split, I realized I would have to earn a living. And that changed my relationship with everything. I mean, partly when I'd started to earn a living, the self-esteem went up because I felt like I've got a place in the world now because I have currency in the world. But it also changed my relationship with regards to whether I needed a relationship, whether I could do things on my own, whether I could support a home. All of those things gave me another standing in my own eyes about where I stood in the world. And inevitably that changed the way I was around other people. But I also think working hard in order to earn money also cut me off from relationships. So I became too busy, which is partly what brought my marriage to an end. And I had to reprioritize. I'd always say that I put my children first, but actually they were probably second to my work. And my work was about the work, which I love, but it was also about money and making ends meet. So I think it was, it was a bit of a poison chalice. And at the same time, it was an investment because I wouldn't be here in the way that I am today if it wasn't for the stuff that I put in at the time. So I have very mixed feelings about earning money and making my way and how it mingles with relationships. I have many friendships. Most of my friendships are with people who don't earn as much as I do or haven't earned as much as I do. And that in itself creates a discrepancy, a dissonance in the relationship. Where do you go for dinner? What kinds of things can you take as given? So, yeah, that's the answer, my answer to your question. It's a little muddled. I don't think it'll clear up. And I've got to make it not matter.
How do you do that?
I think core values come to play. And I think as I've gone through and my friends have gone through crises in their lives, it's kind of counteracted the place that money took in separating us. So we're more joined really in the things that we've experienced and we found that are important to us than we are in our financial situation. It doesn't always happen. But I have a much smaller group of friends than I've had at any time in my life. I love that because I can put all those other things that were important before in their place and concentrate on having a relationship. There's a part dreaming. I mean, I'm thinking while I'm talking, and I'll have to reflect on the way home whether I told you the truth, but that's what feels right now. So it's a mingling, but I do think, you know, retiring is a good thing.
Yes.
And delegating my money thinking to somewhere else has been really important because now I'm free to think about other things.
Agatha, do you talk much about money? Do you talk to your friends and your family about money?
Not a lot, no. It's funny, it's always been a bit of a taboo subject, perhaps even more for women than men. I don't think I've ever certainly discussed what I earn with any of my friends or close family, to the point where actually, you know, we end up in fairly silly situations. Like I didn't realise there was a threshold over which you then have to start filling in a self-assessment. And no one who I knew who earned more than me had passed that on. And likewise, I didn't think to pass it on to good friends or family because I didn't want to tell them that I was earning over that amount of money. So then subsequently found out, you know, good friends, etc., had equally sort of tripped up because they didn't know. So yeah, it generally is a sort of awkward subject. Certainly since working with a financial planner, I have sort of said to friends, you know, well, why don't you at least have a call or think about it? But, you know, then it's, oh, well, I don't think I earn that much money. And, oh, well, so no, I mean, the short answer is it's not much talked about. I think touching a little bit on your response to the previous question, I think, you know, I did have a very good friend some time ago say, you know, I think when I sort of started getting promoted, you know, actually she said, well, I don't, you know, she works in the charity sector and she was, I don't earn that kind of money, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to keep up with you anymore if you're going to want to do things that I can't afford to do. And actually I was so grateful to her to have brought up the thing which perhaps other people had thought but didn't know what to say, because then we could have a fairly honest conversation about it. And frankly, you know, I'm as happy in a pub as I am in a fancy, in fact happier than, you know, I choose to live in East London for a reason. So so yeah, that was probably one of the few times I actually had a conversation about money, and it was very helpful. But yeah, beyond that, it does tend to be quite a sticky subject still.
And yet your aunt was the one who said to you, come on, Agatha, let's get this sorted. What prompted her to speak to you about getting some financial advice?
Yeah, I think initially, well, I suppose I would go to her with, oh, you know, we've got this pension at work, what do you think I should do about it? You know, so I would sort of, when I was confronted with a decision, I would go to her to talk about it. And actually she was the reason I ended up buying my first flat, because I didn't necessarily think it was something that, you know, was for me or what I should be doing in terms of spending my money. And she said, okay, well, let's look, how much have you got saved? What would the stamp duty be? You know, this is a good idea versus renting and the challenges you're having there, and so sort of really pushed me into it. So yeah, she's a woman with quite strong opinions, so which was very beneficial to me. But yes, I think at some point she painted the picture very clearly for why it would be good to be getting help, and frankly pitched it as me no longer having to worry about it because I'd be able to hand it off to someone else, which I think was probably the most successful sales pitch, really. Being able to get to put it in safe hands and stop worrying about it, as we talked about.
Does anyone have parents who spoke to them about money when they were growing up?
No, never.
Yes.
You did?
Yes, my father used to say, he'd give us the pocket money and say, I'd have to present the accounts. Oh, but that's ridiculous. For me, someone like me, I'd put 20 pence bunty or whatever it was, and then so-and-so chocolate. Then I'd put all the balance, I'd put miscellaneous.
I'm still doing that.
Yeah. But it's funny because it made a real have to, an imperative around keeping track of the pennies. Yeah. And I see that as a virtue. I still see it as virtuous when people do that. And feel guilty when I don't.
Do you still do it now?
I do a bit, yes. I do a bit, yes. I enjoy it actually. Yeah.
But Sophie, did your parents talk to you about money?
We did speak about money quite a bit. My father set up his own business. It wasn't a great success. It probably should have shut down 2 years before it actually did. It was a babywear business. I can remember sitting at the kitchen table packing boxes of babywear and shipping it off all over the place. So we did talk about it, and we did know that money was going to be tight. And then because he was so poorly, he then didn't really have a proper career after that. But I think looking back now, my parents were incredibly lucky because they inherited money from their parents. My grandparents paid for my school fees. So whilst there was uncertainty around it, it didn't affect, we didn't have to move out of the family home or anything like that. But Mum was really good because she always just used to say, if you can't afford it, then don't buy it, don't ever buy anything on credit. So that was a very strong message that I got from her. So I think that was valuable. And now that we're lucky enough to be working with Paradigm Norton, we have 2 children and we are talking to them quite a bit about money. They're 19 and 20, and this is so valuable because it's a lot more than we had from our parents. And so, you know, they're working with you guys to really help understand investments, you know, pensions, compound interest, all these things that they really need to know about. And they're, you know, going to listen to you, but probably a lot more than they'll listen to us. I did as a family when I was growing up, but I think we're doing it even more so with our kids.
Good. Are you all unusual in that you have sought out financial advice? Do your friends have financial advice? Do you know?
I have no idea.
Because people
But I have,
it.
I have some exceedingly wealthy colleagues who I'm sure must have. But, you know, they're a lot richer than me. You know, if I'm having drinks with the Duke of Wellington next week, which I am, you know, how many hundreds of thousands of acres has the Duke of Wellington got? And you know, but they're not close friends. These
do mention us if you need a financial advisor.
I'll say, look, Dookie. You know, they must have financial advisors, but it's not something I would ever know about most of my colleagues, and certainly most of my personal friends, which I've kept for most of, you know, the last 30 years or so, they almost certainly don't have financial advisors because they don't have that much money. So it hasn't occurred to them, although probably some of them have more than they think.
Yes, well,
you know, but no.
The psychology of enough, isn't it? How much is enough? Do your friends, Agatha?
Not that I'm aware of, no. And I think with the ones that I've mentioned it to, as I said, it's that all like I'm not extremely wealthy. That's not for me. Whereas actually, they absolutely could benefit from it, but and or thinking crypto was a good idea. So
Yes, it's not, for the record.
No.
It's not.
Not unless you invested yesterday and took it out today.
Tina, what would you go back and tell your younger self about money?
What comes to mind is don't be frightened of it. I think that would really be the core. Don't be frightened of it. Don't be frightened of not having it. Don't be frightened of having it both ways. Yeah.
Tell me more.
Well, I know that when my marriage broke up, I became very, very frightened because I wasn't earning and I felt like I had to grow up suddenly and I didn't know how to do it. And I was very fearful then. And we were in a comfortable situation because my parents had helped me to find a house. We were living in Sheffield, the children were at school, all of those things. But I couldn't maintain things. So I was very anxious about it. And yeah, and that's very wearing. And I think from where I sit right now, I would say to myself, don't be frightened. Just do your best and ask for help. I never asked for help. I really never asked for help until really recently. I never asked for help, not for money, not for nothing. I had to do it myself. And if I had to go back and tell my younger self something, I would say about money and about all the other things is don't be frightened of making a mistake and don't be frightened of asking for help.
Gosh, it's so true. I think, I'd probably go back to younger me and say, the biggest lift you'll get in the world is just asking for help. And people want to help you. People like helping.
But don't you think that for me, as a woman in a man's world, as I was at that time, they were managing just fine. No one was sweating, and I was. And a lot of the way in which you get work, the way I got work was by being confident around myself. And I think I still carry imposter syndrome,
Who knows? I mean, maybe they were leaving the office and
Well,
sitting in their car.
I find that they were, but that's only much later on.
Yes, of course, and our perception of how other people are.
Could
So what would all of you go back?
Could I mention something Fee said, which is, she mentioned the joy of setting up a charity and using your money wisely to do something which is socially desirable, something that makes you feel passionate. I do think that is another important thing, that we have this great good fortune. All right, we may have brought it on ourselves, as it were, although of course I didn't particularly bring the money on myself, somebody else did. But I do think there is a sort of great pleasure and a security in thinking that you have a way of sharing it with other people that is creative and can contribute. And particularly in the early days, I found that there were a number of charities that I felt very connected to, that I wanted to help, and less now, but in the early days particularly, I found that was somewhere that I could feel I was sharing a bit of my good luck, and I think that is very important. And not to waste it. I would say to my younger self, don't fritter it away. You're right, I mean, I never wanted a super jet until now, and I want the comfort. But don't fritter it away. You don't need a super yacht, really, do you? You don't need massive amounts of stuff. But enjoy what you can, but make sure you don't fritter it away and be left without something for the future that gives you some security. Because I think security is very important.
Knowing which side of that you are is the trick, isn't it?
Yeah.
Fee, what do you go back and tell your younger self?
I think it would be all around, I think, like you say, enough is enough. You don't need lots and lots, but what you do need is to do something that you love. So whatever you do that you love, you will do really well, and therefore it will probably bring you more income anyway, because you're so good at it, because you're so passionate about it. And then you've got that sense of self-esteem and self-worth through the job that you absolutely love doing. But equally, it will bring you choices. If you can earn enough to have life choices, then that's also really important and valuable too. So those can help you with, how you educate your children or how you deal with health issues. Having a certain amount can give you those choices that can be super at the time if you need them. But the most important thing I would just say is absolutely just find the purpose and find the real reason why you're doing something, and why you love it so much, and chase those dreams. Don't ever think you can't do something. There's always and the things that you fear the most are the things that you will end up overcoming, and then you'll do them and you'll feel so much more prouder for doing them if you've overcome those fears. So I have a number of things that I've said I would never be able to do, but you do them and you feel great when you've done them.
Yes. Come on, give us an example.
My last little one was my Ironman. Learning to swim and doing that was an achievement. So yeah, and I didn't think I'd do it 2 years ago. So I did. I learned to swim and I did it. So and it was a real fear. Swimming was a real fear. My children will laugh at me because I wouldn't go in the water on a holiday and get in the pool or go in the sea. But now I actually really quite enjoy it.
Good. Agatha.
Yeah, I think I would also tell myself to be less afraid and maybe be less concerned around thinking about money and talking about money. And I think what we talked about, scarcity mindset, I certainly didn't know what that was when I was younger, and certainly had quite a severe case of it, and in some ways continue to from time to time. So yeah, I think it would be to be more willing to address it straight on and look at what you have, look at what you can have and what it can do for you, and be open to asking for help and to helping others as well. That situation of the self-assessment being a great example of actually we could have all helped each other if we just been open about the thing that we were too embarrassed to talk about, which obviously is a lovely thing and a great privilege.
So I, a little while ago, read The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel, and one of the things that really I took away from that book was the return on investment of being financially secure is just absolutely huge. And as you know, I have changed career, I've moved away from the law, as you have, Agatha, and that return on investment for me in being financially secure has meant that I've been able to pivot my career, and it hasn't been around. So similarly, I'm divorced and I have 3 children, and that fear around keeping a house over everybody's head and is everybody going to be okay, but being able to make some choices around how I'm going to spend my everyday has been the most wonderful return on investment. Investing in me, doing some more training, some courses, that kind of thing has been huge. So I'd like to ask you about the return on investment of being financially secure. What's that enabled you to do in life?
Well, that is, I mean, I wouldn't be in the House of Lords if I hadn't been financially secure. I wouldn't have done a number of things, like being able to go to Ethiopia with Oxfam and spend some time with what they were doing there and enjoying it. I wouldn't have been able to do that. So terrific experiences. I'd probably have had would have continued on the same career path, but probably would be be sticking as a consultant and an academic, and I wouldn't perhaps have that bravery to do other things and expand my horizons. So I'm sure that it does make a huge difference. It's interesting though, I remember when I met my second husband, and he had no idea that I had any money. He just thought I was an ordinary NHS consultant, and I kept it that way. When I know it sounds funny. I didn't tell him about the rest because I was still worried that I might meet some person who was a fortune hunter, gold digger or whatever they call them, I mean, it was an absurd thought. If you met him, you'd understand why. It just wouldn't occur to him. But I did keep, I had felt I had to keep it secret until I was very confident of the relationship. But it did enable me, having that money enabled me to do a lot of things that I wouldn't have otherwise done.
What did he say when you finally admitted?
Well, what happened was I told him I had a house in the country, and I said, would you come up for a weekend? And he said yes. And then he did write down in the history of this book what his reaction was. And he said, I drove up and it was dark in his Mini. And he drove up to Norfolk. He said, suddenly I saw this house in a blaze of light and realised that it was your house. And it suddenly occurred to him, maybe it's not just a cottage in the
It's very Pride and Prejudice, isn't it?
And he suddenly he said, oh, I just realised it was your house, and that there must be a bit of money there. But it didn't. Anyway, that was how it happened, really.
Wonderful.
I think it's actually helped Nick and I think in our relationship in a way, because talking to having our annual chat with you guys is almost like a counselling session.
Oh, yes, it is.
So you kind of chat about where you are and what you want to do and your future plans and your thoughts around all those things. Yes, and maybe you ask questions that you feel that you can answer them in a way that maybe you're more truthful than you would be if you were just having a conversation with your husband, or we just didn't used to have those conversations. So almost a bit like marriage counselling and financial counselling and advice all thrown into one. So I think that's got to be really good and really, really positive.
Do you have those, you don't have those conversations with anyone else in your life? Do any of you have those conversations about what you want to do with the rest of your life with anyone else in your lives?
Financially?
Well, I suppose the financial leads to the actual, doesn't it? But is that the only...
No, I would with girlfriends too,
Yes.
but I perhaps wouldn't have been... I guess when Nick was in London, it was very much around, he was in London, I was with the kids. And when he came back at the weekend, we were doing things together because he'd been away all week. So for those 8 years, we were sort of... well, I wasn't perhaps being as sociable as I probably would normally be because I was saving my weekends to be with him.
Yeah.
So I was able to then say, right, you're now not working in London, we're all together. Now's my time to sort of spread my wings again. And I perhaps hadn't had the confidence to say that to him before we had those financial sessions.
Wonderful. Tina, return on investment.
Return on investment, it's bought me time. It's bought me time, and time has become my most valued thing. And a very, very good friend of mine, she recently called me untethered. And it has given me the opportunity to do what I like, where I like, when I like. And until recently, my son and his family were either in the States or in India, because that's where they were posted. My daughter, one of my daughters lives in Australia and she has her children there. My son has his children, she has her children. And my other daughter lives in the UK. And I love to travel and I want to be a granny. I don't want to be a Wednesday granny. Anyone in your family, my family will tell you that. I don't want to be a Wednesday granny. I don't want to pick them up from school on Wednesdays, give them spaghetti hoops, get them in the bath and put them to bed and then go home knackered. That's not what I want to be. I want to be a granny that takes them to crazy places. I mean, I've been to Antarctica, I'm going to go to Argentina, I'm traveling around the world, and I literally love it. And if I didn't have what I have, I wouldn't be able to do that in that way. So definitely.
I've never heard of the phrase Wednesday granny, but I'm
great,
taking that.
Yeah.
I don't want to be a Wednesday granny either.
No. Well, I'm going to send that little clip to my son. Yeah. They all agree with me. Look.
Yes. What are we doing today, Granny? We're going to Antarctica.
With hula hoops.
Agatha.
Yeah, I would say certainly getting control on my finances and having what I call the future Agatha pot. and having a good understanding of what I needed to save, what I have saved, what I have for the future, has really meant that now I can make choices about what I do with my day-to-day. So I've always worked in fairly large corporate companies that you know, are not necessarily the environment that I want to continue working in going forward. And having the financial security has meant that I can use my time to do partly, I sit on the board of a charity, Camden People's Theatre, and it allows me to spend more time working with them as a trustee, which I absolutely adore. But also in my day job, I've taken on the role of running a small legal tech startup for creators. So sort of both of those in the genre, I suppose, of working to support creators, which is something that I've always been very passionate about doing. And because of the financial security that I have built up, I can make those choices, which if I hadn't been able to get a grasp on my investment in the same way, I simply would still be doing the well, I'm not going to say 9 to 5, I wish it was 9 to 5, the 9 to 9 and the weekend in these corporate environments that, you know, weren't necessarily the best place for me to thrive. Certainly, you know, as I look forward for the next, let's be honest, probably 20 years at least of further work, it's really given me the freedom to spend my time doing things that I really feel passionate about and choose who I work with and what kind of environment I'm in going forward. So it's been massively liberating for me.
That time thing is huge, isn't it? The time and choosing what you do with it is, I think when I was younger, I didn't think I could. I thought I would just be a lawyer for the rest of my life and that was it. And I would just be recording every 6 minutes of my day forever ad nauseum. And I remember the first time my financial planner did my cash flow for me. I really genuinely thought I would have to work until I was 75 and that would be it. And I remember that sort of feeling of excitement actually and disbelief when he said to me, no, you have enough, you can. But then I had to make the choice. I had to make the choice then because I could, and I could put off the choice because I said to myself, I couldn't do it for financial reasons, and then I could, and I actually had to make a choice. It's the options thing you were talking about, wasn't it, Fiona? And having to make that leap is quite frightening. But in the same way that you did, I did that hand in hand with my financial planner, and it made all the difference. Hence, all of us sitting here now. I know what you would do, Elaine, but I will ask you to answer this question. If you had, and literally 10,000 is the figure I have. If you had £10,000 to spend on yourself, you're not allowed to give it to charity.
No.
And you're not allowed another jacket.
Right.
What would you do with it? How would you spend £10,000 on yourself?
Are you allowed to take your partner with you? I mean, I would probably choose a lovely weekend in a nice place in a gorgeous hotel, and that's probably what I do. Some local walking. It'd have to have some sunshine, you understand. So I don't know if that's expensive or not. But I think probably that is what I do, because it's that time together and enjoying each other's company, enjoying meals, enjoying be somewhere pleasant. That's probably what I do now. Quite different from buying objects. And there was a time when it would have been all antiques and jewellery and various things, but not now.
And if you had £10?
Probably the same thing. Coffee somewhere now with real coffee. Coffee at the coffee shop in Soho, I think, probably with a bun.
Agatha, sorry, you've been last a few times, so I'm going to go to you, so you're not last again.
Well, my £10,000 would go on a holiday to Antarctica. Happy to, with Tina.
It's amazing, yes.
That's absolutely on my, well, I don't like bucket list because it's more in my 40s list. And £10, oh goodness, that probably only just buys you a pint these days, doesn't it? So I guess a pint in one of the excellent establishments in London.
Tina, Your turn. If you had £10,000, you are only allowed to spend it very selfishly on yourself.
Well, I knew you were going to ask this question, and my thinking was small because I've never had shoes made for me, and I've never had a pair of shoes that really fits me. So I would really love to have a pair of boots, ankle boots, knee-length boots, and a pair of shoes all made for me. I don't know how much they cost. If that's 10,000, great. If it isn't, then I would like to go on a silent retreat somewhere incredibly beautiful, very, very warm, with fantastic food. I don't have to talk to anybody. I don't have to listen to anybody talking. And just spend a week.
So all I can think about now is how your feet are shaped.
They're like that. They're little pointy.
And your £10?
£10, a cinema ticket.
You'd be lucky to get one.
Yeah, I was going to say that might have to be like a Monday lunchtime.
Yeah, it's a Monday lunchtime cinema ticket. Yeah.
I love that, Fee.
Well, you know I have a love of sport, and I'm always trying to encourage my children to do a little bit more sport, but I don't think they really listen so well, so it's sort of something that would be, I think I'd have to bribe them both with 5,000 each to run a London marathon with me or do something like that.
That's so nice.
I keep suggesting to my children they come for a run with me and they keep finding other things to do. So, what a treat. You know, my return on investment is that I'm able to sit in here having this wonderful conversation with the four of you. It's been such a pleasure. We're going to finish up now. And but for anyone out there, particularly any women out there who might be wondering whether financial advice is for them, perhaps thinking, oh gosh, I shouldn't be doing it, or you know, that's not for me. Do you have any advice?
I would say not only is it essential, but it's not financial advice. You need advice on how to shape the rest of your life, and the finances are there to enable you to do that. And that's, so go for it.
I think the most important thing is you don't have to be a billionaire. You know, yeah, it works up and down the scale. It's great, freedom.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think sometimes the more you try and look away from something that you're a bit anxious about, the more it becomes something that you're afraid of. And actually, you know, pick up the phone, have a quick conversation, and see whether there's anything that is worth kind of following up with, because yeah, I think it is far more relevant to a lot of women than they realise, and don't be afraid to talk about money. You've earned it.
Yeah.
No, I agree with all of that, but also, as I say, for relationships as well, for couples to talk openly about it, I think very valuable, and for them to talk to their children about it.
Wonderful. Such a pleasure. Thank you so much, all of you.